What is resilient really means to you?
It means something different now than what it was in the past. But I think staying consistent, staying credible, keep chipping away at what you're trying to achieve. If you have a dream, and I think to your methodology, I think stick to your dream. But there are so many different ways that lead to that. So find that right path and do that using the best things that you can bring to the table for yourself, right?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Resilient Leader Show with me, Dona Amelia. Today, I cannot be happier because the guest and the speaker today is very special. He is really having something special in terms of, his directness in speaking, which is sometimes we need, right? Not going here and there. And he is coming from, yes, of course, the Netherlands. He's Dutch. And he also have similarities with me because his wife is from Indonesia. So I'm so excited to have Corné van Dijk to be the speaker today to talk to us about how can we, stay direct in the nice way and cutting through all the noise that's happening in all our world. As a leader, there's a lot of things going on in our world, in our business and all, but how you can still stay focused and get to the gist of it and ultimately get things done, right? So yes, so let's welcome our speaker for today, Corné. Hello, Mr. Corné. How are you, sir?
Hello, Miss Donna. Thank you for the nice introduction and happy to be here. Glad to be on your show.
Fantastic. Absolutely. And yes,
Yeah.
Corné also the EGN members for many years now. Corné, for those the listener who just listen to you, please tell us about your journey looks like. I know it was fun, but I know you can be as direct, which is good. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. And of course it has been fun. And, it's been a long journey as well because I'm quite old already. But no, I think my professional career started, back early 90s. And, I was very lucky early days. I got introduced into the technology in the IT space quite early on. I actually got introduced to it, running mainframes. And a lot of people today don't really know what that meant, but certainly now that is. Got into the hype, certainly mid to late 90s. Did a fair bit of ERP consulting across Europe. And then at one point, I got a phone call from a colleague in the company to say, listen, there is this position opening up in Asia. I think it's something for you. Would you like to go? So I didn't quite really think about it that much. It looked attractive. I was in a phase of my life where I was free to go where I wanted. So I just jumped into it. And while it originally was a relatively short-term engagement, that was over 22, 23 years ago now. So I jumped in and I never left, right?
Wow, 23 years. That's awesome.
So yeah, and then in Asia, you pick up your roles, you get through various companies. So I've been fortunate enough to have worked for Western companies, for Asian companies, Chinese companies, Vietnamese companies. So I think I've seen a nice variety of different cultures, different styles, and to me, that's the beauty of working in Asia. I honestly feel, right? You get a lot of different aspects of what's happening.
That's,
So
I couldn't agree more indeed. And, even let's say the beauty of Asia, some people, let's say, thinking Asia is as one. Actually, it's not. Even, let's say, as simple as Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore, right? The culture could be different. The way they work and operate could also be different, right? And you have this expertise of knowing many, many countries. And my next question would be that, what would be the things, the leadership journey that really shape you to the person you are today? Like, what is the beautiful moment, or maybe the hardest moment in your career? Yeah, that define who you are now.
and I think it's a good question, right? And I think the things I'm doing today, I think I wouldn't be able to do without those experiences as
Yeah.
well. But if you look back, as I said, I didn't really think about making the switch and coming to Asia. I just jumped in. I was young, I was naive, right? You get on with it, you do things. And I sort of went through my career along that. till a point where I got myself into a role in Vodafone, which was, I thought, a fantastic opportunity. I was the first hire in Singapore, so a very small team, helped to build it out. And I was quite proud of what was achieved. But then the organization went through an acquisition. It sort of changed the whole dynamic within the company and the whole environment. And all of a sudden, a lot more politics and very different politics than I was used to came into play. And I think I just underestimated the impact of that. And I just, as a result, I just got squeezed out. Right. So I think then being forced to think about that, because you find yourself in a situation, what am I going to do next? Right. At first, it looks a bit tough, but then I think, lean on your network, work with your friends, get yourself back up, dust yourself off, but also not be afraid to reflect on yourself and say, okay, did I make some mistakes here and there? Right? Could have handled things differently. And I think without that reflection, I would not be able to do what I do today. Right? Because I think that those are a number of important lessons you get out of there, that, you start recognizing scenarios now that I didn't recognize at that time, so I can avoid situations, and I can hopefully, help and coach people into avoiding the same mistakes that I made. Right?
That's very beautiful, and I like what you say about having this kind of safe space and support, right? Leaning to your network, having a support system. Maybe you have a coach, maybe a friend, maybe a family that really support you in that kind of adversity or like those kind of moments. And if you can tell me what would be the biggest motivation that keep moving you forwards when you are in the rock bottom and so on, from the very beginning until now, what would that be?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm stubborn, right? So I don't give up. So I think that's part of it, right? Just don't accepting the fact that, it will stay this way. So I think that is one aspect. But then the other part is just, realizing that no choice, right? You still need to, get going, show up every single day again, try your best in, getting to the next stage. And soon enough, you'll find yourself, and I found myself getting a fair bit momentum back. You get back on the horse, so to speak, and you start moving forward again. And all of a sudden, that momentum starts, getting things back to normal, and you're back to where you wanted to be and where you needed to be.
Yeah. And you've been already in this industry over 2 decades and all, right? You get a lot of learning, I'm sure, because you're leading across
Yeah.
Asia and globally and so on. So what's your thought on trust and communication and also leadership that you see across this region, across these countries, how important it is to have that?
Well, trust is absolutely a foundation that you need to have, right? If you can't trust the people you work with, if you can't trust the environment you operate in, and if people can't trust you, then a lot of other things start breaking down. So I think it's an absolute cornerstone, but it's not a given, right? You need to work on it, and you need to earn it. And I think that's where sometimes also the cultural variations in this part of the world come in, right? If you go to a meeting in Japan, the way you earn trust and the way you gain acceptance by people is very different from when you go to Jakarta and see people there, right? So I think understanding that is an important aspect, and tailor your communications accordingly. As I said, I've been, from my background, I've been growing up, and we've been taught that it's very okay to, if you see something and it's not right, to say it out loud, speak about it, challenge it. So you need to find other ways of getting the same message across without alienating the people that you're working with, but still trying to get your goal across. So I think I had to work on it, and it's still something I work on every day, right? I think every time you still continue to work on that.
Wow, I like your humbleness about that. And yes, that's actually like the point that I wanted to ask you, how you able as a leader cutting through all the noise and be as direct as possible in terms of solving a problem, right? without, as you rightly say, right, maybe hurting somebody else's feeling and so on, and having the message across properly and being accepted and ultimately being implemented from your counterpart. What's your tips on that, and what do you do? Because I know you say that it's still work in progress, but yeah, give us the tips.
I think part of it is clarity, right? You need to be clear in your message, but I think also be true to yourself and let people understand that, I'm not here to trip anybody over. I'm not here to make anybody, right? We're here to do a job. We're here to do to reach a certain goal together. So let's build that teamwork. Let's work together on that. If you look at how I work with teams in the past and how I would like to work with people in general, right? I like the collaboration and the as a leader to facilitate your team to work, right? If they face a bottleneck, I think as a manager, it's my role to try and fix and get rid of the bottleneck so they can achieve the most out of it, what they can do. And do I always get it right? No, but I don't think anybody does, right? So sometimes, but then as long as people understand, and as long as you understand also with your teams that they're doing it with the best intention and they're doing the best that they can, you build on that, right?
Definitely. I completely agree with you. And I also curious, like in your opinion, because nowadays there's a lot of noise in this world. And of course, change is very fast and rapid and constant, right?
Absolutely.
So as a leader now who lead many people and a lot of things depending on your decision and all, what would be one of the like most important leadership trait or skills or attitude, if you say, right, that is the most important nowadays that for us to have?
So I think a lot of people we've learned that we need to fix problems, right? So we tend to very quickly focus on, solving technical problems, and in that process, sometimes we forget that there's a human element to it, and that there's software elements to it that you can't always control that way. So I think recognizing that, I think, is absolutely important. I think the other part, and I touched on it earlier, is clarity, right? If you're certainly now, I think in this AI wave that we're seeing, right? If you're not clear as to what you want to achieve with your new AI environment, how you want that to impact the organization that you're working for, and etc. How are you then going to translate that to the steps that need to be taken to get to that point? So I think you need to create that clarity. You need to create that path. I think very clearly, and then facilitate all the steps towards that. I think.
I see. So clarity is the most important thing, is it?
Yeah, I would say so, and I think that also means that sometimes you need to convey a message that maybe not everybody may like, right? But that comes with the territory, I think. But as long as people understand why you go into that direction or why you've taken that different approach, again, that explanation, I think, is equally important, right?
Yeah, and this is linked to what I'm like. I just come back from having a lot of leadership training, and one of the leadership training that I do is about managing a difficult conversation. And one of the key elements to that is to really having a clarity on what is the goal and the outcome that you expect, and also the fact that you wanted to convey, right? Because without that clarity, it's vague, and that's why some people are avoiding all this difficult conversation. But for you, what do you do to have a good outcome from having a difficult conversation? What's your normally do?
So yeah, it comes down to breaking things down, right? So a lot of the issues are very rarely pure technical, right? So sometimes it's because of a misunderstanding in terms of what, for instance, a successful project looks like. Other times it's we know that we have underlying legacy system issues like data that is not necessarily as clean or as ready as we need it to be, but nobody wants to speak up and challenge that. So I think building that environment where people can openly challenge without being, I think, penalized for doing so, I think is key, because otherwise you're just fixing the symptoms. You're never fixing the heart. And that is usually not the sexy, flashy message either, right? Because that is the hard groundwork that needs to happen at the bottom, right? You have to get everything right that exists before you can really advertise, the big flashy messages and the solutions that come along with it. So I think, the fashionable things that are important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one things caught my attention is that having this ecosystem or the environment where people are safe, feeling safe to speak up is
Mhm.
very important. It's team psychological safety, right? Because if your team didn't feel that way, they will, like maybe hide things. And that's not good actually, because, if like worst thing happen, you can, navigate immediately. But if things swept under the carpet, then maybe it's becoming a big issues. Only then you know it. Then maybe it's already too late and so on, right? I like when leaders can really, create this psychological safety for people to speak and to really express what they have in their heart, in their mind, of course, in the respectful way, without, afraid of
Mhm.
being punished or being, blame or judge or even get, warning letter and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think just one more thing I might add to that, Dona, is that sometimes you need to understand your own limitations as well, right? In the
Yeah.
sense that there are certain fights that you simply can't win. And, I've been in a situation where I was working in an environment where there were some ethical issues as well. And at one point, you need to ask yourself, do I keep on fighting this in an environment where I'm probably not going to win the battle to begin with? Uh,
Mm,
so I think making a decision to then walk away and put your effort into other and hopefully better things, I no longer see that as a failure, right? I look at that and I go, okay, I made a conscious decision on not accepting that and not wanting to be in that kind of environment. So I move on. And I think that understanding those limitations are equally important, I think.
yeah. Yeah. Understanding the limitation in our side and then choose not reacting, but respond wisely on what is the next move. We
Yeah.
call it feed forward. We understand the feedback, the situation, what's happening, but then move forward, right? I mean, if we all understand you cannot win the battles because
Yeah.
it is just what it is, right? It's beyond our control, for example. Then just move on to the next move, right? Whatever it is, yeah. And of course,
Yeah.
it's how you perceive it as maybe actually it's a victory, not a lose, right? If let's say you feel like, okay, I made up,
Absolutely.
I make myself to go to better situation, for example. Yes, that's very
Absolutely.
good, fair point as well. And if you meet with some like young leaders right nowadays and they are navigating all these challenges, a lot of noises, let's say hard, I would say not easy to work with the bosses or managing their stakeholders, board, any like circumstances that is happening nowadays with AI and change. What would you say? And this person is much younger than you and just entering this beautiful complexity. What would you
Yeah.
tell this person?
Yeah. First of all, don't give up too easily, right? So I think that there is an element of try and work through it. Try and if you see things that you think can be improved, try and actively work on improving that. But to me, I've learned that now, if you talk about being robust and being resilient, it's not the crisis management, right? The crisis hits and the crisis will hit again. But I
Mm,
think it's trying to find that longer term plan, and especially for younger people, I think for themselves in terms of what kind of direction do I want to go? What will suit my expertise? What will suit my personality? And how am I going to make the best of it? And how can I create the environment around me, to get the best out of myself? Right.
mm,
I also have never felt sorry for myself. I found myself in some tricky situations, but you work on getting out of those situations better than where you were before.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I completely agree with you. For those who know me for long enough and being in my leadership training, I have this framework, which is
Hmm.
DONA framework. D stands for dream, O stands for opportunity, N stands for never give up, A stands for action. So we always needs to not giving up because life is hard anyway. It's gonna, throw you here and there and here and there. But of course, you need to have a plan. That's why I start everything dreams, meaning you have a vision, you have a goal, right? And then O stands for opportunity. You need to find the opportunity to achieve your goals by really having some action plan and so on and so forth, right? And don't give up in any kind of circumstances, because things will happen. It's just normal life in your personal life, in the work life. Yeah, things can be hard, and just don't give up. And then A stands for action. The action we need to do, the don't give up, it needs to be 200%, meaning that if you try one thing and it's not working, not saying that, okay, I did everything already. No, you don't. Maybe you wanted to try the B, C, D, E, F, G, for example, that we can do. So I agree with you that never give up. It's
And
very,
it's not
very important.
and it's not always related to people, right? I mean, there are situations where you get impacted by things that are happening around us, and I think today's world is an example for that, right? I mean, if I look now, I'm trying to build my own agency, but if you look at the market, it's a very cautious market, right? Budgets are tight, people don't want to spend money because economically it's not necessarily as certain as it was. Should I then just decide not to do it? No, I think you just try and find different angles and different ways of then going out and making a name for yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know your life is also full of resilient moments. If you can recall one of the most, like important resilient moment in your life, could be personal or could be professional. What would that be?
No, it was probably a bit of a combination of both. So I touched on
Mm,
the situation in Vodafone a long time back, where the political situation and the whole environment changed, and you find yourself in a situation where that I didn't anticipate, but it came at a time where, at a personal level, I was at a bit of a low as well. I was just going through a messy divorce, so mentally,
mm,
I probably wasn't in the best state, to handle that situation either. So you sort of get a double whammy, if you like,
mm,
from that perspective. Um, and at the time, it took me some time to make sense of it, right? Because I couldn't
mm,
quite figure out. And I think that's where your support landscape, both on the professional side as well as the personal side, becomes
mm.
very important. It also brings very good things, right? Because that's the exact same period that I met now my wife, right? So
Wow.
so it gets you out of things as well. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And your beautiful wife now is Indonesian, similar to my nationality. So you got the
Yes.
best.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. One last question, because I really enjoyed the conversation with you. I think we can talk for hours and hours, right? Because we can talk from A to Z. And I really love the conversation with Corné, just for your information, any audience, because we've been talking a lot, we're discussing about things. But if you can give me a summary, what is resilient really means to you?
Yeah, good question. And I think it means something different now than what it was in the past. But I think staying consistent, staying credible, keep chipping away at what you're trying to achieve. If you have a dream, and I think to your Dona methodology, I think stick to your dream. But there's so many different ways that lead to that. So find that right path, and do that by using the best things that you can bring to the table for yourself, right?
I completely agree. Exactly it. When you have your dreams, your vision, try to find the good path, find the opportunities, right? And give your all out in reaching out to that, right? And that's resilient. And of course, it's not about how many times you fall, right? It's about how high you bounce back
And
from
don't
all
don't doubt,
this adversity.
don't doubt yourself, right? Stay true to
Mm.
yourself, believe in your own capabilities, and use that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for our conversation today. I feel
You're welcome.
enlightened. I feel, like really inspired to really, not giving up, and also believe in our talent even more, and maybe dig even more. We always having the untapped potential within us. So find yours. I will find mine as well. Maybe you can also find something as well, Connie. We are like the really like a person who adore the long life learning, right? So that's what we do also at EGN, right?
Exactly right. If we're not learning, then it gets boring, right? So we need to, and the sky is the limit, right? So we can do whatever we want.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming today. And for the listener, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. See you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye bye.